Ah yes, another day, another coffee, another Blender tutorial. But hey, if you're new around here, my name is Keelan and welcome to the channel. In today's video, we're going to go ahead and create this Mac illustration you see right here. So if you are interested in learning something new, start up Blender, follow along with me, and let's jump on into the video. Okay, so let's start by making the backdrop of our design here. So what I like to do is to do Shift A, I'm going to add a plane, S5, and then let's go ahead and press Tab, press 2 to select edges, and I'm just going to go ahead and extrude the back one. Which way is the front here? This is the front, so I'm going to extrude at the back with easy, around there will do. And then select this middle edge, Control V to bevel, scroll your mouse wheel up quite a few times to increase the loop cuts, tab back into object mode, right click shade smooth, and there we have a nice smooth sheet for your backdrop. Beautiful. And now we're going to move on to creating the screen of the Mac. So the first thing I'm going to do is delete the starter cube, Shift A, add a cube. You can keep the starting cube there. I just like to tease the starting cube sometimes. Right, and with this we're going to go ahead and flatten it out. So I'm going to scale this thing. So let's use SY to thin this thing out. I still want it relatively thick to keep it nice and stylized. And then maybe S and X to make it a bit wider. And max are a little bit square, right? So around there I think. That looks pretty good to me. I'm happy with that. And then I just want to bevel all of the corners. So firstly, before we bevel, we do need to apply a scale and rotate. So I'm going to do Control A, rotation and scale. And then we can jump into front view mode. I'm going to go into X-ray mode using Alt Z. Press Tab to go into edit mode. 2. I'm going to select all 4 of these corners while holding Shift, and because we're looking at it from the front here, this is going to select these areas. So if I use Control B there, and you can scroll your mouse wheel up and down depending on how blocky you want this or how well rounded, and just give it a slight bevel. I think around there looks nice. And then I'm going to come into the side here, and while holding Alt you can click here, and that's going to select the entire loop, and then hold Alt with Shift to select the back loop also. And we can use Control B to bevel this out here too. And that's a lot of loop cuts, so I might bring this down, maybe 3 or 4 there, just a slight bevel. Okay, that's looking quite nice to me. And what we can do is right click shade smooth. And if you do have any issues with shading, just come into your object data properties here, into normals, and turn on auto smooth. But that's looking nice. Now we just need the front screen. So I'm going to tab into edit mode, 3 to select faces, and just select this front face here. Then use Shift D to duplicate, right click to leave it in place. Don't click anything else here. Just press P selection. And what we've done is made a separate object we can use to make a screen. Alright, great stuff. So I'm just going to select our screen here, tab into edit mode, and select the face and just extrude it out a little bit. You can keep things nice and chunky here because that's going to really help to give you that nice stylized style. But hey, as I always say, this is your design, not mine, so you do whatever pleases you. And then we can just use Control B to bevel out this front face. Oh, I think I do need to add a scale and rotate here. Let's just try it. Control A, rotation scale, back into edit mode, Control B. Yeah, I think that's a little bit better there. We don't need too many loop cuts here, but you can see here if I do 3 we get a bit of a artifact, so I'm going to undo that. Just make sure you give it enough so that you don't get any visual artifacts when you are beveling your screen. I think around 4 looks like it does the job. Okay, and then I'm going to come to front view mode and just scale this down ever so slightly, just to really create a distinction between the actual hard surface and the screen there. Okay, cool. That's looking good to me. Now let's make the stand. So to do this, I'm going to do Shift A and start with a plane. Then let's scale this down till it's a little bit more accurate. I think about that scale should do. And then I'm going to go into tab into edit mode, 2 to select edges, and just extrude up this back edge. And what you can do then is just do GY to bring this in. Maybe bring this backwards a little bit, and then bring this one in. GY. Around there maybe. Yeah, that looks pretty good. This doesn't need to be exact, so it's completely up to you if you want to spend more time on this. And then what I'm going to do is select this inner edge, press Ctrl B, and we can bevel this out. I only want a little curve, so maybe around here. That's looking cool. And I think I'm going to thin this out just a little bit more. And then we can use right click shade smooth. Make sure we turn on auto smooth in our normals here. And this looks a bit flimsy. I don't think this would be a very good stand right now, so maybe we should add a bit of thickness. I'm going to click on our object here, come into modifier properties, add a modifier, and we're just going to use a solidify. I'm going to reduce my offset to 0 and just increase your thickness little by little till you get something you're happy with. You press GZ to bring this up a little bit, and I think about 0.8 looks good there. So all I'm going to do there is just apply my solidifier and jump into edit mode on our object here. Press 2 to select edges. I'm going to select this edge and this edge. Ctrl B to bevel. And about there will do. And there we have a nice looking screen and a stand. So now let's go ahead and move on to the keyboard and the mouse. And before we do, can I just have a quick sip of my coffee here? Oh, that's hot. So now the keyboard. You might be thinking, oh my god, this is going to take me so long to create every individual key, but I've got the skills to pay the bills, as I've said before. So let's go ahead and use Shift A. I'm going to start with a plain. We're going to go for like one of those, you know, those mini Mac keyboards. I don't use them personally. You can probably tell by the audio that I've got a mechanical, which maybe I shouldn't use for recordings, but we're gonna use it today. So all I've done here is added in a plane, and I've scaled it to the point where we've got, you know, a general keyboard size. And then I'm going to go ahead and tab in edit mode, press 3 to select this top face, and then easy to extrude up. And you don't want too much extrusion here, because what I'm going to do now is press 2 to go into edge select mode. I'm going to select this back edge and just use GZ to bring this up. So we've got a little bit of an incline. Nothing too much, just about there. And then I'm going to go into top view. And then maybe click around here with shift right click. And we're going to do Shift A and add a cube. And it is humongous. So let's just scale this down till it's about the size of a key that you'd like on this keyboard. Because we are keeping everything quite stylized, it doesn't need to be, you know, perfect. It can be like a nice chunky key. Okay, cool. And then I'm going to go ahead and add a scale and rotate using Control A, rotation and scale. And then what I want to do is bevel this out so it's nice and soft. So tab into edit mode with everything selected. You can just do Control B. You could use the modifier too, but I'm just going to use Control B here for a bit more control. And maybe around there looks quite nice. What do you think? Yeah, I think that'll do. So right click shade smooth, turn on your auto smooth in here just to make sure all the shading's looking good. And then I'm going to go into left view so I can really get a good look. Use Alt Z to go into X-ray mode. I'm just going to add a slight rotation to this using R and X there, just so it's sort of in line with the incline. And then of course we're going to need a whole bunch more keys. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go into top view mode with our key selected, come into modifiers, and we're going to use the array modifier. And if I increase the count over here, whoa, that's way too many. You can see all of a sudden we're getting keys galore. So let's just reduce this down until we don't want to go right to the end, because we do want to increase our offset here, just to maybe around 0.3, 0.4, maybe even 0.5. It's up to you. I think I'm going to go with 0.3, and then just adjust. Okay, maybe we'll go with 12. No, 14, and then maybe bring our little key over to around here. Doesn't need to be exact, but that's looking cool. And now of course we need to do the rest. So back into top mode, click on the initial cube, and we're going to add an additional array modifier and scroll down to it. Where is it? It's here. So I'm going to change this offset to 0. Now let's change the Y offset. Would you look at that? We've got a couple more here, maybe 1.2 here too, to keep everything nice and symmetrical, and just increase your count around here maybe. I think that looks pretty good. I like it. Okay, can't remember how many keys a keyboard is supposed to have. How many rows does mine have? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Yeah, that looked good, not including the F keys. Okay, I'm digging it. So all we need to do from there then is apply them from top to bottom. So apply, apply. And would you look at that, guys? You've got a whole bunch of individual keys that you can play around with. But of course, I want to create a space bar, so let's go into top view. And what I'm going to do is tab into edit mode on this cube here. And then I'm going to use L to select these individual objects. And I'm going to go up to around here. With these selected, just use X, vertexes, and that's going to delete those. And then what I'm going to do next is press L on this key here. Shift D to duplicate. X to lock to the X axis. Bring it over around here. And then press 1 to select the individual vertexes. And then what we need to do is make sure we are in X-ray mode, so use Alt Z and select this right side here. Then GX to pull this over here nicely in line. And then just like that, you've got a nice looking keyboard with a nice space bar that's looking nice and pretty. How cool is that, right? A nice quick easy way to make a keyboard. I was quite happy with that one, so hit that like button. Right, and now let's create the mouse. So it's going to be a nice basic shape. We're not going to have much detail in this, so let's just shift right click here, and then I'm going to add in another cube, scale this down, scale this in the Z axis, bring this up, and S and Y to elongate slightly, scale it down. And okay, so now what we're going to do is add a subdivision surface modifier to our shape here. Increase the viewport by 1 and tab into edit mode. Let's go ahead and add a loop cut in the middle here with Control R, right click, press 2 to select edges. I'm going to press GZ to bring this front edge down just to get a bit more of that shape going. GZ to bring this back edge down. And you don't need too much with this because, you know, this part of the design isn't really going to be too obvious. So let's go ahead and thin this out a bit too. So I'm just going to go into top view, S and X. Make it a bit thinner and flatten out the bottom a little bit more too. So in edit mode, Control R, add in another loop cut here. I'm going to use SZ0 to straighten out this edge. Use GZ to bring this down, and the closer you bring it to the bottom here, the flatter the shape is going to be. I think I still want it slightly rounded to keep it nice and stylized and pretty, but a little bit more flattening here. And I think that's looking pretty nice to me. Of course, you could go further in depth if you wanted to add some extra lines to, you know, make the mouse buttons really, you know, obvious. But, you know, like we discussed, I'm happy with something a bit more stylized like that. Increase my viewport, right click shade smooth, and then let's just bring this down to the face of the plane, and G, Shift Z, move this over here maybe, and then RZ, tilt it slightly just to look like it's in use, and there you have a nice keyboard and mouse. Oh, and I do want to bevel this slightly, so into edit mode, Control A, rotation scale, into edit mode, A to select all, and then Control B to bevel. Just a little bevel, just for a little bit of stylization. Is that a word? Shade smooth. I like it. Whoa, I like it. Would you look at that? This is coming along really well. And now let's go ahead and move on to adding in some of the details on the screen, and we should be almost ready to render. So let's jump on into that. Okay, so in order to achieve the sort of application stuff coming off the screen, all I've done is come into front view mode, and I started working with planes. So I just hold shift, right click here, and then let's add in a plane, RX 90 degrees to flatten this out, S to scale, and then just sort of line up your interface where you want it to be. Scale this out, and it's up to you how chunky you want to make these things look, how stylized, what you really want on the interface. But I'm going to start here, and then tab and edit mode on this thing, press 1 to go into vertex select mode. And because these are vertexes, not like edges we're trying to bevel here, you need to use Control Shift B to bevel. And whoops, I've broken my own rules here. So if you're getting a weird bevel, remember, come into object mode, Control A, apply a scale or rotation and scale, then back into edit mode, Control Shift B, and now we're getting those nice smooth bevels. Increase your scroll wheel up there if you want some extra cuts. And I think that looks pretty good to me. So all I did then, it's up to you how you want to build out the rest of it. You could either just extrude this thing out, or you could add a solidify modifier. I'm just going to come to edit mode, press 3, extrude out this face, and then right click shade smooth. Make sure you turn on our normals so that we get some nice looking edges there. And you can either leave them flat against it. I think for my final design, I actually brought mine out a little bit so they were floating. But all I'm going to do then is to do the same again. So I'm going to add in another plane, RX90, scale this down. And I think I'm going to have some sort of box thing going on here. So maybe around here, and Control A, rotation scale. Go ahead and bevel these vertexes out, get something nice and smooth looking. Okay, around there I think looks pretty good to me. And then let's go ahead and extrude this one out too. I'm not using any exact measurements here, so my extrusions may not be the same width, but you know, if you wanted to make yours nice and exact, just remember your numbers. Or you could also use the solidify monitor. Why do I keep saying monitor? Solidify modifier to get some exact values. So if I just bring this out, and I'm just going to go ahead and then duplicate this here. So Shift D to duplicate, X to bring this over, tab into edit mode, press 1 to select vertexes, Alt Z to go into X-ray mode, select all of these, GX, bring this over to around here maybe. That's looking good. And then back out of X-ray mode, and all I'm going to do is keep duplicating a couple of these things about and create a general interface. So I'm going to skip through this part. Okay, cool. So there's that initial bit there, and then of course I had some of the extra bits floating off and just looking aesthetically pleasing, so we can also add some of those into. I think up top here I added a couple of like server looking things just to, you know, make it nice and pretty. So I'm going to do Shift A, add a cube, scale it down, scale it on the Z axis, bring it up, scale it down a little bit more, and then I'm going to come into top view mode, apply a rotation scale using Control A, tab into edit mode, press 2, hold then while holding Shift. You can select all these edges on the outside, back into top view, Control B to bevel. That's looking nice to me. Right click shade smooth, turn on auto smoothing, and then I'm just going to duplicate this up twice, and then make sure it's nice and even, and then join those up. So hold Shift, select them all, Control J, and they're all now nicely one object. We can go ahead, and I think I added a little bit of a 45-degree rotation here, and on the local x-axis. That's looking good to me. And I just added a couple of floating elements around, so using what we've already got here. So you could just say come into front view mode, I duplicated this out, GY to bring this out, you could scale it down, and using what we've already got here, just create some nice stylized floating elements all over your design to really bring it out of the scene, to add a lot more vibrancy, to make it much more prettier, until you get something you're happy with. So I'm going to skip into that. I'm going to go ahead and just bring some extra shapes out and see what we're working with. Okay, I like that. And then what else I also did was I added in a couple of just cylinders to make like coins. So let's do that now. I'm going to do Shift right click just to move my 3D cursor here, Shift A, add in a cylinder, scale this down on the Z axis, and then press Control A to go ahead up and apply rotation and scale. bring this out over here at the moment, time into edit mode 2 to select edges, then hold Alt, click this edge, hold Shift and Alt, click this other edge too, Control B to bevel, and just add a couple of loop cuts in there and make this a little bit rounded on the edges. Then we can do right click shade smooth. That looks good to me. If you wanted it really smooth, you could also add a subdivision surface modifier on top, but I'm going to stick with that. I'm just going to scale this down. And my thought with this one was perhaps this is a Bitcoin website and this is somebody making money, perhaps. So you could have some coins coming out of the screen, maybe coming towards the camera. And this will be a lot easier to, I suppose, decide where you want them when we set up the camera too. But I think that's going to do for now. So let's go ahead now and jump into our materials preview, where we can add some nice materials to our design and really finish this up and make it look nice and polished. So to start, I think let's add a color to our backdrop just so we can really see what we're working with here. So I'm going to click on our plane, come into our material properties here, new. I'm just going to call this BG for backdrop. And what color should we go with? You'll always find on my channel I tend to lean towards the pinks and the bluey spectrums. There's something about it. I like blues and purples. Whoops. And so I'm going to bring it over to around here. And for everything I tend to do on my channel, well, not everything, but most things, I tend to bring up the roughness to around 0.7 or 0.8. This just, you know, because it's not reflecting as much light, I find it gives it a nice softer appearance. But that's my design preference. You know, these things are completely up to you. So let's go ahead and do some of the base colors. So if I come to the keyboard, I'm just going to make this white. And then I know we've already got a white color, but you might want to lean it ever so slightly into the blues, just so it's maybe like a teeny tiny off-white. And then I'm going to click on the keys and give it the same white. And then maybe increase that roughness to around 0.7. Just so it's not quite a bright white, but if you wanted a bright white, that's perfectly fine too. Then click on our mouse here, go into the drop down, give this a nice white material. Okay, that's looking cool to me. And then let's go ahead and start coloring the screen too. So I'm going to click on this larger part and I'm going to give it a color of, oh, I can use the white actually. So I'm going to go back in object mode, press minus to delete that, into the drop down and just use that white. That's looking nice. You can really see the difference here. This one looks very matte and soft, whereas the standard is very shiny, and I'm not a big fan of that. So I like the soft look. Very nice. And then let's click on the screen. I'm gonna do new. Call this screen, and maybe give this like a nice bluish color. Increase our roughness to around 0.7 again. That's looking good. Okie dokie, and then maybe start coloring some of this general interface. I'm going to give this a pink color. Bring the roughness of this to 0.7 again, and I'm going to use the pink up here too. So in my drop down, pink, that looks good. Maybe give it another color over here just to add more. What shall we call this? We give this a nice blue. So maybe lead into the blue slightly over here, or even ooh, I like that yellow. Yeah, I changed my mind. This is going to be yellow. I like it. Very nice. So that's looking cool. So our roughness of 0.7. That's looking okay. And the stand, of course, make this a bit of a silvery grey color. So lean it slightly into the blues, down ever so slightly, nothing too much. 0.7 again on my roughness, and that's quite nice. I like that. A little bit of a bluey grey. And now some of the other interface features, so maybe the coins, just call this coin. Make it like a bronzy color maybe, or nice yellowy, orangey, browny, you know, one of those. You can maybe bring the metallic up just a smidge to make it a little bit more reflective, but I wouldn't do too much because you might end up working with like two different styles. We've got one thing that's looking really metallic and one thing that's looking really stylized, so I'm gonna add a little bit of metallic there. Then just make the rest of your coins coiny, if that's a word, and maybe add some colors to over here too. So maybe make this a yellow, maybe make this one another pink, Or purple? Where's the purple colour for the backdrop? No, I'm not digging that. Maybe just another pink over here. Okay, that's looking cool. And I'm going to come into our little stack here. Tap into edit mode. Press L to select the middle one. I'm going to do new. And we're going to have to give this a base first, actually. So back into object mode, delete that. Give this a base of white. And then I do the plus. Tap into edit mode with this middle one selected. Go to the drop down. I'm going to give this pink and make sure you assign it to the middle one there. And there we have a nice stylized looking interface. Alright, so let's go ahead now, set up some lighting, set up our camera, and render this bad boy out. Okay, so in order to see the lighting, initially we're going to have to go up here and jump into rendered preview. And you can see the scene is quite dark initially, so let's just take our starting light here. G to move this over towards the front of our design. And I'm going to tell you over and over again, every single design I use, for the most part, uses a basic 3-point lighting setup. So I'm going to put one there, Shift D to duplicate this out to bring one over here, and then Shift D to bring one a little bit behind our object over here maybe. And now we just need to adjust the values because everything is far too bright right now. So we could probably keep the front one at around 1000, but bring up the radius, which is going to really reduce the harshness of those shadows. And then over here, I'm going to reduce this light over here to around maybe 600. The idea of this light over the side is just to soften the shadows that are created from the main light, and maybe reduce the softness of these a little bit. If you're getting a lot of flicker here, because we are in EVs, you can come into your scene properties and just increase the viewport render, depending on how much your computer can handle, and that should really help reduce those shadows, or that shadow flicker. And then for the backdrop, the idea of the back one really is you can add a nice silhouette of light and play around with the color depending on what sort of tone you wanted to bring to the scene. Like something nice and bright with the pinks, or lean into the blues to get some nice and tawny. Oh, I like that. That's quite nice. That's looking pretty. I think I'm going to stick with that. And then let's jump into our camera. Press N to open up the end menu, into view, lock camera to view. And get a nice sort of angle that you like. That's looking cool to me. Maybe around here. And I'm going to make sure we click lock camera to view off. End to close. And we're going to need to expand out the backdrop just to make sure it covers the rest of our scene here. So maybe we just press S and X to scale this outwards, just to make sure it really covers that up. Yep, that's looking okay to me. And I think we're almost there. So if we just come into our render properties now, a couple of settings I like to adjust with these sort of scenes. I like to come down to my color management and turn my look to high contrast. That's really just going to make your colors pop and just look really vibrant. And then if you're working in EVs, you might want to play around with the ambient occlusion. But I like to render these in cycles because the lighting is just beautiful. So with that, I think we're pretty much good to go. So this is where the magic happens. We're going to go down into our drop down here, select cycles, and see what happens. And there we have a beautiful Mac illustration model. So now what's left to do is you can come up to render image, or press F12. I'm going to skip into this and we'll be right back with the final render. And that is looking really nice. And a quick tip, if you are getting a lot of grain in your cycles render, then all we need to do is come back into Blender here, and while in cycles, if we come down to our scene here and scroll right down, I don't know why it's right down here, but there's this little option here now called denoising. Just check that. The default settings are normally pretty good, and all we need to do, that's just going to go ahead and denoise your image. So if we render again, we should have a much clearer image. And there we have a nice satisfying looking Mac 3D illustration. And that's going to bring us to the end of this tutorial. If you did enjoy, a like is very much appreciated, and if you'd like to see more of this type of content, consider hitting that subscribe button. But my name has been Keelan. I hope you enjoy the rest of your day, and I'll catch you in the next one.